Well, good evening, freedom fighters and Alberta patriots. Here we are for another session on policies, procedures, and what can and should we be doing as Albertans. It seems like each week there's this hope that things might change for the better, but yet the government keeps clamping down on us and refuses to give us back our freedoms. This fall, we're having a referendum. Premier Kenney has promised this since way back when he was running for leadership, and then when he was running and campaigning, and he's talked about it lots. But the problem is he wants to put this ridiculous question on there: is do Albertans agree with equalization? And then he says if he gets a big enough mandate that he can go down to Ottawa to say, oh, wow, did you know that Albertans aren't happy with equalization? It's meaningless. It serves no purpose. And referendums aren't cheap. We're going to be spending, some people estimate a couple of $1 million to have a referendum in this fall's municipal election. I don't honestly know how much it really costs to add in extra questions. The real question is how much advertising, promotion, and whatnot's going there. But I'm very concerned, and I think that we should have some real questions on the referendum this fall, not meaningless ones that serve no purpose other than a political smokescreen to make it appear like Premier Kenney is doing something. The fact of the matter is that equalization is a federal program. There's nothing that we can do about it unless 50% plus one and 7 provinces agree to change it. And why would the 7 wolves possibly want to vote, or maybe I should say 8 or 9 wolves vote to say that they can't keep eating the lambs from the sheep, that the rest of the Canada can't keep taking away our money and spending it for their pleasure and their benefit. And so tonight, that's part of what we're going to talk about. I also want to talk because Premier Kenney, since the Fair Deal panel came out, and again, he delayed that, didn't let it come out, and there's lots of it that was redacted. We've never really seen the real report that was submitted to the government. Again, it was kind of a for your eyes only report. And that's a real concern and needs to be addressed, but won't be with our premier, is obvious. But he said last fall that he was going to set up a commission to study whether or not we should have our own police. And, he's going to study to see whether or not we should be collecting our own taxes. And I just think this is unbelievable. The question is who should be in charge of Alberta? Who should be making decisions for Alberta? And there's no question in my mind it should be Albertans, and it should be our premier, not Ottawa and not other wolves voting to have a majority rule to impose on Albertans. But to me, there's 3 purposes of a referendum that are very valid or validify why we should have referendums and what we can do. I want to go back to 2004 when I first got elected into the legislature, and Premier Klein was still in there at that time. It was a year out to our 2005 centennial, and there was a lot of excitement, and Premier Klein was bent on paying off our debt. When he got elected, I think we had 21 or 25 billion dollars in debt, and he had a big sign that he put up, paid in full. And those were exciting times. That was just 15 years ago. When did he get elected? In 92 to 2005. It took him quite a few years to pay off that $25 billion in debt. But one of the things that he did is he passed legislation that said that the government had to balance its budget. And this is a purpose of referendums, or one of the purposes. First of all, I believe that it should be in the Constitution that governments have to balance their budgets. That's the best and surest way to I want to say, restrain and limit the size and scope of government in the Constitution. But one of the problems that we have in our parliamentary system is that no government can pass legislation that binds the next government from coming in there. And we've seen that down in the States, where one president signed and said that, nope, Keystone XL is good. Next one got in, nope, Keystone XL is canceled. And same thing happens in our provincial legislature. Premier Klein passed legislation saying that the budget has to be balanced, and all surplus funds were to pay off the debt. And we did that for 15, 20 years to get out of debt. But it wasn't too long, and Premier Klein handed off to Premier Stelmach $17 billion in a sustainability fund, which is another whole subject. I'll talk another time on that and what should have been done, in my opinion. But it only took Stelmach a couple of years to blow through that sustainability fund, and then he was in a conundrum because he couldn't balance his budget. And so what did he do? He passed legislation saying that it was okay for infrastructure and capital projects to run a deficit, because this is for future generations. We're spending money now. We're spending their money, but it's for their good. We can't balance our budget, but it's okay for future ones. And so had Premier Klein put it to the people back in whether 97, 98, 2000, 2005, and had a referendum saying that we want the government to balance its budget, Premier Stelmach couldn't have gone into the legislature and just the flip of a vote or two throw it out. He would have had to gone back to the people. So one of the purposes of a referendum and why there's good is that that's actually a second block on government passing legislation that the people don't want, not trying to buy votes with other people's money. Another purpose, though, of a referendum, and again, whether you want to call it citizens initiative and referendum, is that sometimes there's things that the government just won't do, and the people have to push to get that done. And for example, the case right now, the governments say they can't balance a budget, and they're not going to bring in budget balance legislation, but that should be on the question this fall, in my opinion, is that the government needs to balance its budget, and that should be voted on by the people, not 87 MLAs who have a very different vested interest. And so that's a second purpose of referendum, is for the people to actually vote and push and impose on government things that they want. And then a third purpose of referendum that's often very beneficial for a democracy is when we just see elected people vote, those that aren't in favor of that are upset. But when you actually see the people vote and support it, then let's use balanced budget legislation. Right now, the division between, I want to say, the public servants and the government is not healthy and not amiable, and there's a lot of fight back and forth. And so if the government was to bring in balanced budget legislation, there'd be a whole lot of screaming and yelling and hooplas, and this can't be, we can't do it. But if they actually put it to the people and ask them, do you want us to balance our budget like municipal governments and other ones, and the people voted yes, well, that's a much more calming effect, in my opinion, and more amiable. But anyways, we have a huge opportunity this fall because our premier has promised a referendum just on equalization. And I hope to spend the next 6-7 months pushing to get some different questions on that referendum. And the only way we're going to do it, though, is if people like yourself talk to other people and we get some movement going and insisting on some good questions this fall in the referendum. And so one of the things I've been invited to and been part of is the Economic Education Association of Alberta, a website, freedomtalk.ca. I'm bringing on today the chairperson, a longtime friend, Danny Hozak, and again, he's putting on this conference, and I'm going to be able to go and speak on a couple of subjects on what I think should be on this referendum this fall. But David, can you bring Danny on here? Good to see you, Danny. Just telling the people here that, you're having your conference this Friday, Saturday. Maybe, David, you could put that up, this Freedom Talk conference. It's March 5th and 6th. It's a virtual conference. You can go to freedomtalk.ca and sign on there. But the important thing is that this conference is about, the referendum this fall and what it's going to be about. But Danny, maybe just tell us a little bit about your conference and what's happening this weekend.
Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate you inviting me on. And yes, our conference is going to start. It's going to start at first thing Friday morning, 9 o'clock in the morning. John Robson, as you know, is one of our main people, and he's going to sort of lay out the the reason for what we're doing, which is to a certain extent you've touched on it. We want to get 3 or 4 more questions on the ballot. Premier Kenny was talking about saving some money by doing the referendum in conjunction with the municipal election. We'd like to help him save some more money by adding 4 or 5 more questions to the ballot, and we're hoping to each of our speakers, and we've got a world-class group of speakers that are going to be speaking, but their speeches are going to be crafted in such a way as to make the case for putting a specific question on the ballot. And we've got
Danny, just want to stop you for a second. Can you put your computer, your phone on a solid spot because it's bouncing around a lot? And
okay, yeah, fair enough. Can you? How about if I put it right there so I'm not holding it? Yeah, there we are.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep, that'd be better. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no, that's not the first time you've interrupted me, and it doesn't bother me.
Won't be the last either. Sorry.
No, no, that's fine. Like sometimes, that's just great. So, in any event, we've got a world class group of speakers. As you know, you're going to be making the case for recall and balanced budgets. Dr. Roger Hodkinson, who's comments to Edmonton City Council went viral, talking about the lockdowns and how they shouldn't be compulsory. Dr. Patrick Moore is going to be speaking at noon. He makes a very logical case for the fact that the Paris Agreement is continues to be a nail in Alberta and the energy industry's coffin, and he's going to be making the case for getting Alberta out of the Paris Agreement. In the afternoon, Derek Sloan is going to be making a case for principled conservatism and how that would help not only our province but our country. Our keynote speaker after supper is going to be Maxime Bernier, who's going to talk about radical decentralization, which we need not only in the country but in our province. So we've got a world-class group of speakers. The speakers are going to be in the room, and we actually, besides having the virtual event, we have room for 20 or 25 people, which we were hoping that we're going to Lloydminster because they're under Saskatchewan rules, and we can have about 30 people in the room, and we're going to do like we did in July. We've got 2 rooms of 30 people where we'll telecast into the second room. So if anyone would like to attend in person, they could contact me. My cell number's on the website. They could contact me to see if we still have any room. And the one other speaker that thankfully you've got us is Danielle Smith, is going to be presenting virtually at noon on Saturday, or just after noon on Saturday, talking about collecting our own taxes. So that's sort of the thumbnail sketch of what we're doing.
Tate, I just want to tell our viewers here, we're going to share some of those questions with you, but one of the things that Danny's doing, and I'm very much, I'm actually working with a couple of individuals in looking at how Albertans can be more involved in the democratic process and voting. But in this virtual conference, we'll be using Slido, and people will be able to be voting and interacting to help us come up with better questions or to vote on a question. And tonight, we're going to demonstrate this with 3 questions that we're going to ask that everybody who's watching will be able to vote. But David, do we need to put that up so that people can start to connect so that they're part of Slido? I don't know how that's going to work for someone on a computer. Do they just click on it, or do they?
So what people need to do is they need to go to slido.com, as you see there, and there will be a spot on the homepage that says join a meeting, and you put that number in 33821, and it'll take you to the meeting page. The other thing and the other option is, you see that funny code there, that's a QR code. You can actually use your cell phone. If you're not watching this on your cell phone, you can actually use your cell phone's photo app and just point it towards that QR code, and the actual link will pop up automatically on your phone. And just so you know, guys, we already have a couple of people who are joining us there. So people are already signing on, so that's good news.
Okay, well, I'm actually just trying to slide on with mine. I guess when I use the QR code, you don't need to put in the password then. Is that correct?
I think it takes you
I
right
think so.
where you're supposed to go.
Yep. I just used the QR code so I didn't have to go to a website because I'm on my computer, so I used my phone. Okay, so let's we need to leave that up for a little bit longer. Has everybody been able to get that? Slido.com 33821. But like I say, if you use your phone, but maybe people are watching on it, we can pop up there, but we'll see how it goes. But so anyways, that's going to be part of the exciting part. And I really think that this is something in the future that we need, is for people to be able to participate more in what government's doing. You know, for example, because we're only allowed 3 questions tonight, and I don't know, maybe we should switch the one, but we're not, I don't think I want to at this point, is should the lockdowns be ended? You know, those are the type of things that the government could put out, and we could start responding to. But again, it's disappointing because we'd be surprised, you know, according to the government, the polls are saying that 80% of Albertans want these lockdowns to continue. And the real question is should 80% be able to have that tyranny over the 20% and say that you can't go out and carry on and work and make a living because we say you can't? And too often people are comfortable in their situation and won't allow other people to go out and do what they feel is important. I don't know how many of you have watched Kristi Noem's presentation to CPAC this weekend, but I see a day later there's already been over 1 million views on her presentation to the U.S. Conservatives. But she was the only governor in all of the states that never went to a lockdown. And she took the decision that they would get the best information that they could come up with and present that to the people, and then let the people assess the risk and govern themselves accordingly. But the kids are in school, businesses carried on, the economic impact didn't hit South Dakota. But anyways, it's worth a watch to go to YouTube and look up Kristi Noem and from South Dakota and to watch that. But we just need better government, government that actually realizes the importance of protecting our rights, not taking them away, and protecting one's freedoms, and not, again, stripping them away. But so going back to that, and again, I can't hardly see on my screen, it's so little. Are we got questions there we're supposed to be answering there? Let's see here.
I can't read them. I'll have to find my glasses, but just while drop my
Well,
phone. But just
David, do you have those up because you want us to answer those questions? I got to get some reading and see if we're going to do that.
I put them up so people can see what's going on. That if they do join, they can actually post comments or questions and be part of it. So no, you don't have to necessarily answer these. This is just to encourage people to come on with us on Slido.
Okay.
and
So
David,
anyways, this is what will be at the conference this weekend. Is you can, if you register at freedomtalk.ca and attend, you'll be able to vote there as well. But tonight we're going to ask 3 questions, and I don't know, maybe we should ask the first question right now, David, and let people vote on that. Do you want to put up the first question? And
just while he's putting up the question, David or Paul, could I say that one of the options that we've signed up for the meeting is we'll put the questions up, and if you like the question, you can like it. So as the speech is going on, people will be liking it. For example, Paul may ask a question and 100 people will click like, and I might ask a question and 5 people will click like. So then Paul's question will go to the top of the list and it will be answered first. And so it gives the moderator a sense of the questions that people really want asked. And so I think I'm looking forward to how it works. And on this example, on the test case, you only get to ask 3 questions. Once we get to the conference weekend, there can be a unlimited number of questions, which we'll only put so many up, but then people can vote on them, and we'll ask the ones that have the most audience interest.
Okay, super. So I just want to read the questions for those people who aren't on Slido. But the question that's going out right now to people who've gone to Slido is, do you support the Alberta government in creating a provincial police force with an elected civilian oversight? And so at that point, I'm now going to push yes on mine and send it and put in the vote. And so far, it looks like we're 100% in there. But with that first question, I just want to go on a segue here for a minute. Last fall, the premier, after the Fair Deal panel, says, oh, we're going to put together a commission to study whether or not we should have our own police force. And I just shook my head. Are you kidding me? Like, do we want our police force to be listening to Ottawa and what Ottawa wants? For example, to lock us down for COVID, to arrest people as they land in the airport and haul us away from federally I guess, employed security people. Is that the type of thing that we want? Is Ottawa to be making those decisions? Do we want Ottawa to pass their order in council and now Bill C-21 to confiscate what currently is a legal firearm and to step in and to tell the police what they want? Or do we want civilian oversight here in Alberta to make that decision, and we can tell them to stand down? We're not going to enforce that. And it's an interesting thing with the police force, is that you can pick and choose on whether you give out fines and tickets or whether you just educate or how you respond. And it's important. But what I want to back up to, because I was disappointed when the premier is asking whether or not we should be having a police force, there's no question in my mind. We actually need a provincial police force that's looking out for the interest of Albertans and not Ottawa. But the problem is that every year, March 31st is the deadline to give notice to the RCMP, a 2 years notice, that we're going to be ending the contract. And I was disappointed with the premier saying we're going to study it. It's quite, I don't know, evident to me that he's not going to respond before March 31st, but he should be giving notice to the RCMP now. And if in fact this fall the people don't support that, well, then there's no harm. But otherwise, we're going to lose 6 months. We're going to lose another year. And we need to get this going now when we see what Ottawa is doing to us and how the overlords are making decisions, and then the police are enforcing those. And again, by next year, we could have legislation in place to have our guns confiscated by Albertans. And again, they say that they're going to give compensation, but that's yet to be seen. And the billions of dollars it's going to cost the taxpayers to do that is just unbelievable to me. But so something else to be on the radar and to start putting some pressure on Premier Kenney is to give notice to the RCMP that, look, we're not going to need your services anymore. And we don't need to study whether or not we want it. We need to study on how we're going to improve our police force. But Danny, maybe you want to talk a little bit, I think maybe tell them who's coming to talk about the provincial police force at our conference, and maybe share a little bit on that.
I certainly can. Thank you, Paul. Rob Anders spoke at our conference in July about the history of provincial police forces, and we
Uh-oh, you've been silenced, Danny. Something went wrong.
passed. Whoops, there we are. Did I just get bumped out by a phone call? But in any event, we had a federal police force. Am I still there?
Yep, you're back.
Yeah, we had a federal police force like in the early 1900s, and the federal government came along and said, we're going broke, you're on your own, you're going to have your own police force. And we did it in in a relatively short time. And so Rob talked about that history at the last conference, and he's going to speak again on Friday, or I think he's speaking on Saturday actually, about actually doing, as you've said, setting up an Alberta Police Commission, going through the process of how you would go about having civilian oversight, and how you go about setting up the police force, which could be done in a relatively short period of time if we set our mind to it. So we're looking forward to, he's given it a lot of thought, and we're looking forward to hearing his presentation.
Well, one thing I like when I have a guest on here, it gives me a second or two to look at the questions coming in. And again, it's scrolled off my screen here, but Beverly asks a very good question, or makes a point here that, oh, whereabouts was that? That actually towns, or maybe it's Brandon that's answering that for Beverly. So I'm trying to do double duty here. I'm not very good at that. But the fact of the matter is, under the Alberta Provincial Police Act, is that towns of 5,000 people and over can actually have their own police force and just say, you know what, we don't want the RCMP here in our town anymore. Tabor, they have they had over 10,000 people 10 years ago, but they've had their own police force, almost for 100 years for a small town. And again, if you go back and if you look at Tabor and their local police, they've got a great relationship with the people of Tabor, and they're actually there protecting and working with the people in Tabor. And so that's another position that certainly can be taken in these small towns, is that we could bring in our own police and replace the RCMP even at a municipal level. But that's one of the things that we're covering in the conference. I don't know. Maybe
could I just say one more thing on this topic? Like, one of the things that Leon Craig said in the fall of November was, he suggested that the provincial government should have a department of autonomy that was working at answering some of these questions. Like, when we say, well, we should have our own police force, a lot of people say, oh, that would cost too much money, and oh, it would this and it would that, and no one really, it's hard to find the exact numbers. And Leon Craig, if his health is good enough, is going to be there to make the case for having a department of autonomy that was just working through coming up with the numbers from these different options, on the police force collecting tax, all this stuff. Had we started that 5 or 10 years ago, all this information would be readily available to us. So again, it's another I think it's another good question that will be on the on the discussion on the weekend. And had we done it, it would be a lot easier to be having this discussion we're having tonight. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's always, economics is always an issue, and you got to do your cost benefit analysis. But sometimes it's not a matter of economics. For me, even if we got to pay an extra $100 million, I want our own police force. I don't want a federal police force having the strings being pulled from Ottawa. And so the real question to study is what do we do to have an effective police force that's working with a judicial system rather than a legal system? And so, we'll do the due diligence on those things. But some of these questions, to me, the economics, bottom line is police cost money, and we just need to do it efficiently and effectively. And again, many people that argue, oh, we can't have our provincial police force, is because we get federal subsidy from that. But one of the other subjects that we're going to talk about, though, is taxes. But what's the next question, David, that we're asking on Slido? Okay, boy, once again, I'm not going to be able to read on that little screen here, but do you support the Alberta government in collecting all the taxes being paid by Albertans? Danielle Smith will be doing the honors on talking on this. And, it kind of goes back to that old saying that possession is 9/10 of the law. If we're possessing and holding all of the taxes, I better vote here. I want to make sure I get my vote in here. 1 second, people. Put that in there. Okay, got my vote in for that. I'm all for it. And it's terrible. It was 100%, wasn't it, for our own police force? I forgot to look before we took that off.
It was.
Anyways, and I kind of find it amusing, because that's going to be what it is virtually with equalization. That going to be a very high percentage. Why are we asking those questions? But one of the other points that I wanted to make about referendums that I think I kind of got off topic here is that this reinforces government's decision. So when the government says, for example, then starts collecting their taxes here in Alberta, and they have a referendum, if Ottawa says, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, for the government to be able to say, well, look, we asked the people of Alberta, we had a referendum, and 98% of the people were in favor. And so it's actually a way that the government can validate what they're doing and have that huge support, because more often than not what we have is a government that makes this outrageous claim that, oh, we got elected, we now have a mandate to do whatever we ever thought we were going to do because we got elected. And again, the referendum actually asks the questions rather than not. But Danielle Smith, who I'm thrilled has accepted to come and speak at our conference on should Albertans collect our own taxes. And again, it's just so critical in my mind. And what Premier Kenney should have on the referendum this fall is an endorsement of Albertans saying, yes, we want you to collect your own taxes, not, oh, should we collect our own taxes? No. Do you support us in collecting our taxes and having that actual endorsement so that we have something rather than just a yes or no that, oh, we should do that? That's meaningless as well. Danny?
Yeah, I'd just like to add one thing to that you often mention and you haven't touched on yet. And that you said, like, if you look at parliamentary tradition, if something's brought in by the legislature, it can be taken out by the next legislature. But if something is brought in by a referendum, it's sort of parliamentary procedure that has to be taken out by a referendum. And when Ralph Klein, when we had no debt, and then Ralph passed the, we'll never borrow again bill, like had he put that to a referendum and said, okay, we're going to have a referendum, we will never have debt again. Well, then, as you know, the first time the government needed money, they just went in the morning and they repealed the bill and they borrowed money in the afternoon. But had he put it in with a referendum, well, then the next government would have had to have a referendum to take it out. And so I think that's another one of the real selling features for, doing some of these things by referendum. You have the blessing of the people to do it, and somebody just can't come along at a whim and change it.
Yeah, no, it's so important. And again, with balanced budget, and Ted Morton has talked on this, quite a bit, that, had he passed that in a referendum, Stelmach couldn't have gone through there. But another one of our guests, I don't know how many people have seen this book, Moment of Truth. And again, it was put out by Jack Mintz, Ted Morton, and Tom Flanagan. And Tom is going to be here at the conference, and he'll talk a little bit about equalization and whether or not we're in or out. And again, I think that is kind of a wasted question to think that that's what we're going to hold in a referendum. But it'll be good to hear from Tom as he presents and talks on that. But don't know, do we want to go on to the third question there, David, and ask the people the third one? I'll bring it up here on my phone again. It keeps going off, but and again, I didn't look at the results of the last one there. But do you want to be able to hold elected officials accountable through recall? That this has been, guess I better vote on that here. Well, I've got it up on my phone, but this has been probably oh my goodness. See, this is a little bit different on whether or not people should be held accountable through recall. It's a good thing there's more than a few people voting, because that jumped up to like 17% to start with. And again, recall is controversial. I always get a kick out of the elected people who said, oh, we couldn't do anything that would be tough if we had recall. And I've always said, well, we shouldn't be doing anything that the people don't support. And again, it's kind of interesting, but I just think that the two biggest things that we could actually do in order to save our democracy, in order to save our children's future, is number one, to have accountability of elected people. That I've just been in there, I've seen it, and once they get in there and have that power put on their head, there's a high propensity to abuse that and to do things that they shouldn't do. And we, as the people, are what would I want to say? Well, human nature is such that if you know there's nothing that you can do, you're not going to do anything at all. And so why bother and be frustrated for months on end, years on end, when there's nothing you can do once the election's over? But if you have recall and you're frustrated and you want to stop something, for example, these lockdowns, if we were to go out and start recalling some of our MLAs who won't speak up on our behalf, all of a sudden they start paying attention. And it's kind of like during an election period. It's amazing to me how accessible politicians are during the campaign, and how all of a sudden they get they close the curtains, the iron curtains, and it's very difficult to get to them afterwards. Before, they're all wanting to listen to your ideas, what you have to say, and afterwards they've come to their own conclusion. They know what's best. And so, again, I'll be speaking on recall at the conference and the importance of it. And the other one, though, is the balanced budget. And if a government was accountable through recall and had to balance its budget, I just can hardly think where Canada and where Alberta would be today if, in fact, that was the case. But Danny, any comments on this last question?
Like, if there's anything that you've made a believer out of me, and it's the value of recall, although I must say you had a lot of help from Rachel Notley and Justin Trudeau, but nevertheless, it certainly you've made a believer out of me on recall. And the other point that you didn't mention is, like, we're certainly not here to defend Jason Kenney, but in fairness to them, they tried to freeze some, government wages, and they took a tremendous amount of flack from it. And had there been recall, my guess is that some of the public sector people that were affected by that would have tried to recall them. But I think it would have, like, if they'd started going door to door and knocking on people's doors, certainly in Lloydminster, and saying, "Oh, the government wants to freeze my wages. Like, would you like to sign here so we can get rid of them?" About 2/3 of the people in Lloydminster would say, "Well, actually, I've had a 30% reduction in my wage, or I've had a 66% reduction in my wage. Like, get off my doorstep. You're making me mad." And so, to me, what it would do, it would take some of the steam out of those people, where they would be going back and saying, there's not that much support for, or there's actually a lot of support for freezing the wages, trying to balance the books, trying to look after. So I agreed with you 100% when you said we shouldn't be doing it if we don't think 50% of the people agree with it anyway. But the other thing does is it sends the people that feel offended, they can go out and knock on doors, and then they'll get a real sense of what ordinary people are thinking. So I think that's the other benefit of recall as well.
Yeah, no, I really found that so important, that when the government has passed something that you think is wrong, and you think the majority of the people are on your side, there's a lot of divisiveness and animosity builds. But boy, when all of a sudden you go out and you start door knocking, there's a great easing of the pain when you realize that, oh, I guess people want this, and so you can kind of accept that. But when you get it from the dictates of a premier or a prime minister, it's very frustrating, and people, definitely just, well, they're helpless, and what can you do? But anyways, accountability to me is great, and I'll argue that I didn't need the help from Rachel and Jason Kenney. That was help for you to come to see the light.
You already do, yes, right, exactly.
But anyways, it's quite exciting. And again, as a comment here, and David, maybe you want to put up that George Washington quote right now for me, if you don't mind. Okay, if the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb in silence we may be led like sheep to the slaughter. And I've talked about this several times. And again, this conference that we're having on, it's about an educational opportunity for people to understand and to learn, and then to have the discussion. And you can keep Danny on here still, David. I'm going to ask him a question here. But it's so important that we don't have censorship. And this last year, there's two things that we've really come to just run into a glass wall. Is one, that our freedom to associate and to go out and to make a living and to do things has been stripped away. But the censorship, and especially in social media has been astounding to me. That this political correctness, that you can't talk, about climate change. You can't talk, about whether carbon is good or bad. That you just can't talk whether or not we should be allowed to go out and to open up a business. And you can't, have preachers that are talking these things. And the censorship is alarming to me, and it's wrong. And again, it's something else that I'm sure that someone at our conference will be talking on. Actually, Andrew Lawton is going to be talking a bit on that, isn't he? But censorship is a real problem, and this attitude to silence those that are questioning the status quo is very harmful. And I just think there's nothing more important than being educated and reading. Gosh, I forgot to send you the other quote, David. I'll bring it up another time, but basically, I'm going to see if I can find it. Danny, you go ahead and talk a little bit about censorship and your thoughts, and I'm going to see if I can find this other quote.
Yes, well, like what Andrew Lawton is going to talk about is the importance of a free and independent media. As you know, like the mainstream media in both countries are, they've become, for a whole host of reasons, in Canada, about $2 billion of media subsidies is one of the main reasons, but they become so left leaning. And in our days when we were kids, Walter Cronkite and George Robertson, they used to tell you what the news was, and then we would decide on our own what to think about it. Now we've got to where the mainstream media decides what you should think, and then they tell you the news in such a way that they hope that you will come to think as they do. And we really need independent media to give us the facts, so that again we can come to our own conclusions. And so these, when you look at the True North, Andrew Lawton, Candace Malcolm, the Rebel, some of those people are doing an invaluable service, like without any government money. I should have, said, of course, there's Eric Filderbrand and the Western Standard are doing another good job of trying to get real news out. So I think we have to be both appreciative and supportive of the independent media, because otherwise, and one of the things that Andrew was going to say is, there's not much point having a referendum unless people have access to the facts so they can make an informed decision. So that's what we're working at here at the conference, is try and get the facts out so people can make an informed decision.
Yeah, I'm going to do a quote here from 1894, so it won't be the most politically correct quote, thing, but it's from Leo Tolstoy. The kingdom of God is within you. But he goes on, this is his quote: the most difficult subject can be explained to the most slow-witted man if he has not formed an idea of them already. But the simplest thing cannot be made clear to the most intelligent man if he is firmly persuaded that he knows already, without a shadow of a doubt, what is laid before him. And again, with the censorship and the propaganda that's going out there, many people, and I'm going to say that with the socialist mindset, have been told these things, and this propaganda that we can basically equalize everybody and take from the rich and give to the poor and redistribute and have a wonderful society. They're against the free market. They're against free enterprise. They're against, merit and people getting ahead. And again, how is it that, was it Churchill who said that the thing about socialism is that we can all suffer equally in misery of it? But anyways, that's been one of Danny's big goals, is to educate people so that we can actually make informed decisions. And that's what the conferences are about. Is this our eighth conference, Danny, or seventh, or is it the eighth?
I think it's nine, actually, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
wow.
It's nine, yeah. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's an amazing thing. And so I mean, this is the first one where we're having to say, well, sorry, you better register quick because we have to limit how many people can come, which I never would have guessed when we had our first conference in 2012 that we'd ever be saying to anyone, well, the government is telling us how many people we can have at our conference. But I just have two quotes that I quite like as well, which one is was said, we are currently doing things in defense of society that may well create a society that's not worth defending, which is not a new quote. It was Cicero in
Yeah.
50 BC. So we still
Yeah.
have that problem. The other thing I would just like to encourage people to sign up and either watch it virtually or let me know if you have time to come. We still have a few seats in person, but a lot of people will say, oh, I'm not interested in politics. And I always say, well, actually, my grandpa wasn't interested in war either, but he still went twice so we could have a better life. And we have had. So I would just encourage everyone that's sitting here, if you have children and grandchildren, like, send us $50, get registered. We've got some absolutely world-class speakers coming from across the country to try and help build a better future for Alberta and for Canada. So thanks for having me on the show. I hope a lot of your followers will, consider signing up virtually or maybe even coming. Thank you.
Well, don't go away, Danny, because we're going
I
to
won't go
answer a
away.
few
No,
questions here,
yeah,
maybe. But
sure, yeah.
anyways, I'm just going to read one here. Like I say, I enjoy it when someone else talks, but we've got one here from a follower, the tinfoil hat. I totally agree. By the way, when I posted about hunger in Venezuela on the NDP and Rachel Notley's Facebook page, they blocked me. That is what they do or are. And it's so true that when we talk about a lot of these things, it's censored and it's just wrong. But David, haven't been watching over there, but do we have some questions that people have sent in that we should answer here? And do you want to pick a few of those up and put them on the screen?
I will take a look for questions. I don't think there's really much questions. There is one here that's not really related to our topic today. If you want to answer that.
Kate? Well, thank you, Alberta Free. I love that movie with Mel Gibson. But yes, we're actually got a few things created. I think we're getting close to having some bumper stickers and a little bit. But we've been a little bit slow on the draw on that. And again, our finances, and one thing that the Wild Rose Independence Party won't do is spend money that we don't have. We're kind of getting into a financial situation here now, though, where we have a little bit of spare cash, and we're going to be putting together some different hats and shirts and bumper stickers and things like that to get out to the members, that we can start, putting up some signs. I would love to even get some lawn signs, that talks about Wild Rose Independence Party. Our freedom is just around the corner. But yeah, if you have some ideas, send them in. But we realize the importance of marketing and people to see us, because that's the number one thing you'll find. If you ask most people, have you heard of the Wild Rose Independence Party? I'm afraid we're not high enough in the polls. We were at 9%, a couple of months ago. But we want to get to where everybody knows about us and what we're representing. But any other questions then? Oh, here we are. If you were to win power, would you shut down immigration and foreign spending until we get our economy back under control? Well, one of the 6 things I always talk about is to have our own immigration policy. And I really feel that again, historically, immigration has been very important, but what we need is people that are needed. And again, if they're either sponsored by business or by family to be brought in. But I agree with you. Right now, we don't have a shortage of workers or anything else. But what we do have a shortage of workers. But the reason why is because the government's handing out free cash. I know several business people that are trying to hire individuals to come back, and they just answer, well, why would I do that? I'm getting enough cash right now to pay for everything. I don't have to go to work, and it's really hurting our recovery and our economy. But no, we'll have an immigration policy that works for Albertans and for Alberta businesses, and it'll be very much focused that way. And if we've got low or high unemployment and the jobs have been destroyed, we certainly aren't going to be bringing in workers and adding to the problem. I hope that answers your question. Would our equalization payments and taxes be more than enough to support our own police force? Well, excellent question, Sharon. Right now, historically, we've been sending, is it about $40 billion a year down to Ottawa? And supposedly we get about $20 billion worth of services, or $10 billion worth of services. They transfer back about $9 billion for Alberta healthcare. But there's an argument that anywhere from 10 to $18 billion gets sent down to Ottawa that we never see. It gets redistributed around the world here in Canada. And we would have probably the most dangerous thing about all of this is that we might have a government that becomes reckless here in Alberta because of the extra revenue that we would actually have. But if we were to collect and keep the federal taxes here, I firmly believe that we could eliminate the provincial tax. We would just have the federal tax. But there's a lot of taxes that we could reduce, attract businesses here and industry, and to be a producer of wealth, and just have a tremendous benefit. We could actually lower the taxes, but yet increase the revenue and be a great benefit to Albertans. But I just see this as a one-way street to health and wealth. that we can't afford not to, because right now we're on a one-way street to poverty and sickness and not able to look after ourselves. But hope that answers your question in a roundabout way.
Oh,
Can equalization ever flow
could I
from
just
the?
ask a little bit to
Yep,
that, or yeah?
yep,
Okay. Well, I think we actually, the last I saw some of that stuff that came from, Jack Manson, the Fraser Institute, I think we send $50 billion a year down there. They transfer 9 billion back to us in these different healthcare things and one thing and other. And they supposedly provide us with $21 billion worth of service, and then $20 billion never comes back, which that's how they got 20 billion times 30 some years is 600 and some billion that we sent that never came back. But even besides that, the 21 billion in services that they provide us, if we did what you're suggesting, the firewall plus our police force, our pension, had all that, we could, even if we didn't cut any like federal jobs, if we created them in Alberta, it would be a $21 billion a year mega project, and the people would be working in Vegreville and Edmonton and Red Deer and Lethbridge and Tabor, and instead of in Ottawa and Hull, you know what I mean? And of course, we wouldn't have to have the cost of bilingualism here either. So it's just a mega project waiting to happen, to take charge of our own affairs the way you're suggesting. So the numbers are just stunning when you start looking at them. So anyway, good for you
yeah.
for suggesting to do it.
Yeah, no, it really is staggering the amount of money that, back in 2005, I got a paper, and I back then, I guess I started speaking out against the problem of taxation, and it's way more than just equalization, and it's another reason why I'm not in favor of that. But go ahead, David, and put up that next question there, if you would. Can equalization ever flow from the east to the west under the present agreement? Well, first I want to say that the problem is that they keep moving the goalposts. We should have been getting money for the last 2 years, but they keep moving the goalposts, much like they do for COVID. If we get below 600 hospitalizations, we'll open up. Oh, if we get below 300, we'll open up. And they keep getting it there, and then they say, oh, but we're really nervous that it might take off again, so we're going to hold it down. I always, the West for a long time has said that we want to end equalization. And I actually would say that if we stay inside Canada and don't become a sovereign province, that equalization will actually end much quicker than you believe, because of the force of destruction on our economy. We will soon be a have-not province. And at that point, the East will say, yeah, what's the purpose of equalization? We're not going to send money to you. And so could it flow west? Yes. Will it flow yet west? I don't believe so. That will be the end of equalization, when there isn't a sugar daddy in Alberta paying for it. But that's my view on it. Danny, any comments?
No, you're absolutely right. Like, I mean, we're the engine not only of the Alberta economy, but the Canadian economy. And as things get worse here, I mean, their provinces will be even in worse shape. So, like, relatively sinking, we're just all sinking together. But I don't see any scenario where we'd be getting anything back from the rest of Canada. And I just wanted to mention Venezuela. You touched on it there just for a second. This is a little bit off this specific topic, but Paul, you were speaking in Strathmore, if you remember, and we met that lady. She was from Venezuela. Her and her
Yep.
mother, her mother came here. But lots of people say, "Oh, I don't care what happens in Canada. I'm going to move to the Costa Rica or the Cayman Islands or wherever." But this lady and her mother left Venezuela. I think it was 8 or 10 years ago. I just forget the story. But her dad, who was a businessman, they wouldn't let them all out of the country at the same time, and he can't get out of the country. So some of these people that have a lot of money that think, "Well, that's all right. I'm just going to go to Costa Rica." Think about it again. You may be able to send your kids and your wife there, but you may not be able to go with them. So I think we're in a lot more difficult situation than anyone would like to admit. And the sooner we deal with it, the happier we will all be.
Yeah, there's no question in my mind that people compare, I want to say, the current democratic governments like the Titanic, and they say that they're unsinkable, that we can just keep printing money, we can just keep pumping it into the economy, that there's no worries, that it's okay. We're a sinking ship. We've already hit the iceberg. We're $1 trillion in debt. Unfunded liabilities are another couple of $1 trillion. And we're not going to be able to get out of this. But Albertans know better, and we want to be fiscally responsible. And to me, we need to put our house in order, pay off our debt, and have a future. But boy, this is like sitting on the Titanic, and the thing that you have to realize that once it starts to sink and you start scattering and thinking you're going to get in a lifeboat, first of all, there's not enough lifeboats for everyone. And number two, if you haven't got away soon enough, when that big ship goes down, that lifeboat doesn't have enough buoyancy to stop you from being sucked down as well. And it's just, we're at a critical situation. We need to say no more. We need to collect our taxes. We need to have our own police force. We need to have our own Canada Pension Plan. We need to have our own Environmental Act. All of these things are so critical if we're going to have a future for our children and grandchildren. But just can't thank you, you followers enough. Go to wildrose.party and take a look at us. Go to freedomtalk.ca. This conference will be awesome. Lots of good information, but we do have a bright future, but we have to do more than words. We need to take the actions, and we encourage you to talk to your friends, to get them to buy memberships, and those that can afford it, to please donate. But we understand the economic stress many people are in. Don't feel obligated, but $20 3-year membership will be the best $20 that you'll spend here in the next 3 years. Danny, do you have a closing word that you wanted to say about the conference, or?
Just one closing word. We have a few people have said, well, why are you bringing so many speakers from Eastern Canada and from, Vancouver to talk about the future of Alberta? And the reason we are is because, Maxime Bernier, Derek Sloan, Andrew Lawton, John Robson, they've all given a thought. And there's a lot of people in Eastern Canada who care about Alberta as well. And the ones who've given a lot of thought to what it will take to keep the country together, realize that one of the things that needs to be done is we need to get out of the Paris Agreement. We need to take our foot off of the throat of Alberta. And some of these speakers who are coming to speak at our conference are the only politicians in Canada who are defending Alberta's energy industry and our province. So I just think we've got an absolutely fascinating group of people coming, talking about the future of Alberta and the country. I appreciate you having me on, and I encourage everyone to go to our freedomtalk.ca and sign up at least to attend virtually. Thank you.
Yeah, well, there's just nothing more important at this point, and with what's going on in the world, than fighting for our freedoms. The way they've been attacked, the way government is growing, wanting to control every aspect of our life, telling us that we can't get together for even weddings or funerals, and very important social events for families have all been attacked, and there's only one solution, and that's to say no to this government. We need a political party that their whole purpose and priority is to protect the freedoms and the property and the opportunity of its citizens. And our government is turned upside down. We are the servants of government. The government should be serving our best interest. And again, probably the most appalling thing that I've seen in this whole COVID dilemma is number of times that we hear that our Dr. Henshaw and our premier say, what we need to do is protect the integrity of our healthcare system. It's not about protecting the individual's health or their mental state or their economic state. It's about protecting a very flawed and dysfunctional healthcare system that they had a whole year to create and become more robust. It was interesting also to listen to the Florida governor, DeSantis. What's his name? DeSantis. Anyways, he was prepared to put up field hospitals across the state if they needed, so that they wouldn't return seniors or sick people back into at-risk spots, senior care facilities or whatever. And there's no reason why we didn't do that here in Alberta. We could have built the structures. I mean, for 20 years, our governments have said, oh, we don't have enough senior care facilities. Did they build any this fall? And again, we could have rented the hotels to put people back in that were recovering, so they didn't go back into the general population. And well, hello, that's who we're doing it for, is the grandkids.
This is Logan. This is who we're doing it for. Yes.
Yeah, but anyways, we really appreciate all the people that have tuned in. Look forward to seeing many of you this weekend. And again, Wednesday, I'll be going live again. I'm hoping. I haven't heard back from Dr. Hodgkinson here in Alberta, who, like I say, became quite famous when he spoke out months and months ago at Edmonton City Council. But we just need to get this information out, because the fear mongering that's been going on is devastating. It's hurting our children. It's hurting our economy. It's hurting families. And it's just wrong, and we need to stand up and speak out against it. But anyways, take care. God bless, and thank you very much for your support and your efforts in spreading this message around. But we'll see you again.